के ठुकराता हूं। अब होगी भेंट रणभूमि में, तुमको कुरुक्षेत्र बुलाता हूं।
नमस्कार। स्वागत है आप सभी का कही सुनी के इस 20वें अंक में। और जैसा कि हम लोग पिछले शनिवार को बात कर रहे थे कि हम लोग महाभारत के ऐसे किरदारों के बारे में बात कर रहे थे जिनका रोल महाभारत में बहुत छोटा है, लेकिन उनका जो इम्पैक्ट था ओवरऑल स्टोरी लाइन में, ओवरऑल नैरेटिव में, वो बहुत बड़ा था। तो इस सिलसिले में हमने बात करी सत्यवती के पिता की, जिन्होंने एक दो सीन के अपीयरेंस से पूरी महाभारत की काया पलट कर दी थी। और भीष्म को वो प्रतिज्ञा लेने के लिए उन्होंने मजबूर कर दिया था, को बेसिकली कोवर्स कर दिया था अगर बोले तो, कि भाई मैं राजा नहीं बनूंगा तो फिर तुम्हारे पुत्र क्या करेंगे। तो देन ही कोवर्स्ड हिम इनटू टेकिंग दैट भीष्म प्रतिज्ञा कि भाई मैं पुत्र भी नहीं पैदा करूंगा। उसके अलावा हमने और भी बहुत सारे ऐसे किरदारों के बारे में बात की जिनका रोल महाभारत में छोटा था, लेकिन उनका जो ओवरऑल इम्पैक्ट था वो बहुत बड़ा था। तक्षक की बात करी थी हमने, दुर्वासा की बात करी थी, और इसी तरीके से और भी बहुत सारे किरदार थे जो हमारे छूट गए थे। तो इस बात को आगे बढ़ाते हुए आज फिर हम इस कड़ी को लेके आए हैं। तो इसमें हम लोग कुछ ऐसे किरदारों की बात करेंगे जो युद्ध के पहले जिनका योगदान रहा महाभारत में, और जिन्होंने महाभारत के नैरेटिव को काफ़ी डीपली इम्पैक्ट किया, अफेक्ट किया। और कुछ ऐसे किरदारों की हम बात करेंगे, क्योंकि आप मेरे पीछे अगर स्क्रीन देख रहे होंगे तो आपको रणभूमि का बैनर दिख रहा है। तो उसको ध्यान में रखते हुए हम कुछ ऐसे किरदारों की भी बात करेंगे जिन्होंने युद्ध में रोचक अपना योगदान निभाया, और युद्ध में उनका रोल स्मॉल था लेकिन उनका ओवरऑल इम्पैक्ट बहुत बड़ा था महाभारत में भी। और हो सकता है हम थोड़ा बहुत हरिवंश का भी इनपुट ले लें, क्योंकि वो भी महाभारत का एक एक्सटेंशन ही कहा जाता है। तो इसमें ज्यादा भूमिका न बांधते हुए सबसे पहले हम लोग बात करेंगे भारती जी से। एंड भारती जी, आप कौन से किरदार के बारे में बात बताएंगी, ये जरा आप सबको बताइए। ओवर टू यू भारती।
Yes, hello Gaurav. So today I think I'll talk about Jujutsu first. So Jujutsu is this guy. इसका इनका योगदान एक्चुअली युद्ध के बाद काफी था, युद्ध से पहले भी काफी था और युद्ध के दौरान तो था ही, बट युद्ध के बाद से अगर शुरू करें तो दैट्स हिज ग्रेटेस्ट कंट्रीब्यूशन, क्योंकि वो आगे आए एक दूसरा भीष्म बनकर युद्ध के बाद, क्योंकि उनको रखा गया था परीक्षित का मेंटोर बना के कि वो उनको गाइडेंस दे पाए। और कुरुवंश का जब इट वाज ऑन एन एक्सटिंक्ट स्टेट जबकि परीक्षित की एंट्री हुई थी, एंड व्हेन द पांडवास वांटेड टू लीव, परीक्षित वाज नॉट येट किंग एट दैट टाइम, तो उसको राजा बना के ये लोग निकल रहे थे। तो उसको गाइडेंस देने के लिए युत्सु को वहां पे छोड़कर गए थे कि कुरुवंश का कोई रिप्रेजेंटेटिव रहे परीक्षित को गाइड करने के लिए, along with सुभद्रा who was the राजमाता। युत्सु played a very key role। तब हमको दिखता है कि फिर से वो भीष्म सत्यवती वाला इक्वेशन आ जाता है युत्सु और सुभद्रा के थ्रू। So Jujutsu played a very key role after the war also in ensuring that Dharmarajya was stayed the way it was supposed to stay. So that was a very critical thing, क्योंकि अगर वो नहीं होते तो शायद things would not have been that easy for the Pandavas, इतनी आसानी से जा नहीं पाते। So if you see, during the war also, he had a huge contribution to the Pandava side. He was the one prominent warrior who switched sides and became the Dwapar Yukka Vibhishan. And he's the one guy who, despite being a Kaurava, after Abhimanyu dies, he is the one guy who is standing in the middle of the war field surrounded by enemy, and he actually berates them directly, openly. कि तुम लोग you just killed Abhimanyu and the Kauravas are actually exulting, नाच रहे हैं अभिमन्यु के शव के धूप. So he is the one who actually berates them कि क्या कर रहे हो तुम लोग, this is not the way to fight a war, and he throws his weapons and he actually points out a very critical point कि you people took revenge on Arjun in this way because you couldn't kill Arjun, you killed his son and now you're rejoicing. बट कल सुबह को जब अर्जुन और कृष्ण आएंगे अवेंज करने को, तब तुम लोग क्या करोगे? एंड ही थ्रोस हिज वेपन्स एंड ही गोस ऑफ. सो हिज सेंस ऑफ राइटियसनेस comes out again there. Of course, the fact that he switched sides itself tells us that he knew where which side dharma lay on. And this was not a coincidence कि उसको ऐसे लगा था तब. It was not like he thought कि okay, this is a good time to switch, let me switch. कृष्ण उस साइड पे है, मैं चला जाता हूँ, ऐसा नहीं था. Even earlier, बचपन में जब ये पांडव गुरुकुल में थे तो इतने सारे असैसिनेशन अटेम्प्ट्स हो रहे थे उन पे, दुर्योधन और तर्ण और दुशासन के जरिए. तब भी it was Yuyutsu who saves them plenty of time. He gives them the information, insider information इनको उसके उनके द्वारा मिलती है. And one of the major things that I think he saves them from is Bhima's poisoning, I believe, is told to them beforehand. They are warned in several occasions कि ऐसे हो रहा है planning, तो आप लोग जरा सतर्क रहिए. So in this way, Yuyutsu is in a lot of ways responsible for the Pandavas' safety also. He's one of the, and he's not a very weak warrior or anything, because at some point of time, Dhritarashtra says that Yuyutsu is a powerful warrior who has been fighting, who fought a war at Varnavath for 6 months. So he had been given responsibility, serious responsibility. So clearly he had proven his competence, because otherwise Duryodhan handing over a responsibility to Yuyutsu, who was not exactly Gandhari's son, not a blood brother, would have been, he would have definitely balked at it. But the fact that Yuyutsu was leading a contingent and fighting a battle for Hastinapur tells us that he had proven himself as a warrior beforehand, so much so that Dhritarashtra actually praised him as a warrior and said all this. But so his contribution to the story begins very early, right from Gurukul days.
So, जिन लोगों को नहीं पता, युयुत्सु was Dhritarashtra's son through a maid or another woman, not Gandhari. And it seems that probably Duryodhan did not treat him well, or whatever the reason, but he was always helping Pandavas and protecting them from Duryodhan's schemes. And yesterday I was joking to Bharti that if I ever write a novel about Mahabharat, I will probably make Yutsu the spy master of Duryodhan and Vidur. Yudhishthir and Vidur, because how they were getting all the insider informations about Duryodhan's schemations is a very key thing, which is mysterious. Vidur always knew everything. How did he know? राइट दुर्योधन के आसपास कौन से ऐसे लोग थे जो सब कुछ जान रहे थे और विदुर को बता रहे थे. तो युत्सु का रोल बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. और उसको क्योंकि हमने बात करी यहाँ पे कॉन्स्पिरेसीज की, सबसे बड़ी एक कॉन्स्पिरेसी तो भीम को मारने के लिए तो दुर्योधन ने बहुत बार प्रयास किया. उसको जहर दिया, फिर वो नागलोक सेकंड पॉइजनिंग जब वो प्लान कर रहे थे तब युत्सु ने बता दिया, तो भीम ने बोला अब तो मुझ पे जहर का कोई असर नहीं होता, लेट मी डू इट. तो भीम भी थोड़ा कम नहीं थे. भीम भी मतलब आउट ऑफ द वे जाके मतलब जबरदस्ती जहर पीने का उन्होंने कि देख लो अब जहर पिला के भी कुछ नहीं होगा, पिलाओ और कितना
अच्छा खाना क्यों वेस्ट करना, चलो खा
ले. he was like taunting people कि हाँ मैं तो वृकोदर हूँ, मेरे पेट में आई खीर क्यों वेस्ट करनी है, मैं खा लेता हूँ, जहर ही तो है. एक बात पे खा के बच चुका हूँ. बट जो सबसे बड़ी कॉन्स्पिरेसी थी वो थी पांडवों को जो जलाकर मारने का प्रयास किया गया था उनकी माता कुंती के साथ. और इसमें एक बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट कैरेक्टर इन्वॉल्व था, क्योंकि अब देखो उस पॉइंट इन टाइम तक धृतराष्ट्र वाज नॉट एक्टिवली ट्राइंग टू harm Pandavas. Everything, the blame was always on Duryodhan, and that is why their life at Hastinapur was not at threat. Because I mean, obviously at threat from Duryodhan, but the state was not sponsoring their killing. But then one event happened which actually forced them to leave Hastinapur and never to return back in the same shape and form. Was the conspiracy of killing them at Varnavrat. And there were two very important characters in as part of this, who were very small characters mentioned only in 1 or 2 chapters, but played a key role. So one of those characters was Kanik, and I would ask Pranshu to talk about Kanik.
So actually another thing which actually Bharti did mention was that Yutsu fought for 6 months at Varnavath. That is an event which happened after the Varnavath Lakshagraha Dahan. And so in that one, basically, also Dhritarashtra and Sanjay are discussing this, and they are basically giving a pointer कि युत्सु अकेले 6 महीने लड़ता रहा, उसके भाई उससे ज्यादा दूर नहीं थे. आप देखिए गंगा के हस्तिनापुर कहाँ पे है और वारणावत कहाँ पे है, इतना बड़ा डिस्टेंस नहीं है, बट 6 महीने वो अकेला लड़ता रहा, उसका कोई भी भाई नहीं आया.
हेल्प
तो
करने
जब
नहीं आए।
महाभारत शुरू हुई तो he decided he's not going to fight on the side of the people who will not come to him. And as said, Bharti said, he showed his valor, he showed his competence in actually fighting alone for 6 months and preventing whatever enemy attack. We're not told much details about it. So, but that is a very important point here. And again, that all started with Varnavat. So what happened at Varnavat? So Yudhishthir was the crown prince and he was getting more and more popular. This guy, Duryodhan, as people have been saying कि रासु यज्ञ में उसको गिफ्ट लेने के लिए कर दिया था, but he was also the same role he was doing in Hastinapur at that time. He was the treasury in charge. बल्कि एक जगह वो भी है कि both Shakuni and Gandhari were expert mathematicians in Dakshinatya Shlok. So basically the thing is something he inherited from his कि उसको बेटा जोड़ जोड़ अकाउंट्स के लिए कहा था, गधा से मत खेलो.
एक्सेल एक्सपर्ट।
Exactly. So but the thing is कि वही था कि Dhritarashtra started feeling that Dhritarashtra actually, okay, there is one thing. Yes, Dhritarashtra never really warmed up to the kids. There's never any, even in the suggestion when Karn was challenging Arjun or something, you are the king, you are the Tau, this is your son, you're basically, you are responsible for him. Some Era Gera is coming and challenging you, your nephew, you should be the one speaking up. Dhritarashtra doesn't speak anything there. You see, Dhritarashtra was actually sort of already there, but the one what now the next action is, this is okay, you are not happy with your nephew, that is fine, but then you actively try to kill them, and that is where Kanik comes into play. And Kanik is a very important character actually. Of the 12 Aditya, the only Aditya born who's of Ansh Avatar, whose avatar is basically shown, is Kanik. He's Mitra. Mitra Varun are the two important characters which are very basically are always twin together. But Mitra is Kanik, and that is a very important aspect which Harivansh says. Mitra Avatar is Kanik. Kanik is the older brother of Drona. He is Bhardwaj's son. कहते हैं in Kumbhayan and in the southern retellings, in Indonesian retellings, the three brothers are basically Kanik, Kumbhayan Drona का another name. द्रोण में पैदा हुए थे, वो कुंभ में पैदा हुए थे, कुंभयान, and Shrutavati or Odyavati. The Odyavati is so they all three are children of Gritachi. I mean, Bhardwaj went, saw Gritachi, Kanik पैदा हुए, he saw Gritachi, Dron पैदा हुए, Odyavati पैदा हुई. Odyavati married Indra. So there's a story on that also. So basically, and then after that, Yavkrit was born, the fourth son, जो Aravasu Paravasu उसमें आते हैं. So he was first, Kanik appears, basically he is the political advisor for the Sauvir king Shatrunjay. Then what we notice is that Arjun goes to 3 different campaigns, he kills Sauvir kings, right? And he brings back the wealth of it, sort of annexes Sauvir, which probably was given as Dahej to Jadarath, because the next person who's ruling Sauvir is Jadarath, son-in-law of Hastinapur state. So Kanik is now part of it, and Kanik is the one who persuades Dhritarashtra that he basically went for the Sam Dam Dand Bhed, and he explained the story of, basically he told that Panchatantra tale about that the jackal, the hare, the lion, and the there's a small animal. I keep forgetting that small animal.
बाद में वो भीष्म वो कहानी सुनाते हैं, 2 बार है वो कहानी.
Rat, mongoose, rat, fox, and
no, I think it's rat.
Rat. So this is a very interesting point also, because it's the rat Kanik who saves Pandavas. So there's a very nice allegory Vyas does. Vyas doesn't he always has triple meanings in this. So the rat is the one who basically scares off, in the case when jackal drives when the fox drives him away from the body of the animal they had killed, right? and tiger is told ki it is poisonous and all that. So the thing is that rat is the one who saves. Kanak comes in and saves Pandavas. So Kanik is the key here. Kanik is the one who basically crosses the line. He is the advisor to Dhritarashtra, and he manages to persuade Dhritarashtra to cross that line, to send them to it. And it's a very and the name of, so he, that's where basically Purochan comes into play. So that's where we should pass the baton on to for Purochan to Gaurav.
Thanks Pranshu. So basically when जब दुर्योधन कर्ण और शकुनी सब ये मिलके प्लान करते हैं कि भाई युधिष्ठिर बहुत पॉपुलर हो रहे हैं, इनको रास्ते से हटाना चाहिए, क्योंकि अब तो धृतराष्ट्र ने पता नहीं क्यों इनको युवराज बना दिया और अभी ये युवराज बन के पॉपुलर हो गए तो मेरा तो पत्ता गुल. सो दुर्योधन वाज रियली वरीड. सो जब ये प्लान बनाते हैं तो धृतराष्ट्र इज इन टू माइंड स्टिल. But when he talks to Karnik, he has made up his mind. So as Pranshu said, Karnik basically convinces Dhritarashtra to cross the line, which he was always sitting on the fence, never on the other side, but this basically where he crosses to the other side. So this becomes a very important event. Had Karnik not been that advisor, maybe let's say for the sake of this conversation, वो time में वो विदुर से बात करते हैं, हालांकि उन्होंने विदुर से भी बात करी थी. So it comes across as if he was looking for a way कि कोई बोल दे तो मैं उधर चला जाऊं. He wanted to go the other side, but nobody was telling him to do that, and Karnik was the first person who said नहीं, it is the right thing to do. And he tells that story of 4 animals कि मतलब आपको किसी न किसी तरीके से अपने किंगडम को प्रिजर्व करना है एंड अपनी जो आपकी संतति है उसको प्रिजर्व करना है. तो युधिष्ठिर को अगर आपको जलाना भी पड़ता है, द वर्ड्स क्लियरली आर यूज्ड कि यू कैन यूज अग्नि also as a strategy to eliminate your enemy, and from that agni emerges this whole conspiracy where they are sent कि भाई आप इधर जाइए, वारणाव्रत में बहुत बढ़िया वहां पे मेला लगा हुआ है, मजे करेंगे. And then they basically pack off all these guys to Varnavrat, and then enters this guy called Purochan, who was like an architect and contractor for Duryodhan, and he was the person who builds this palace of Lak. Basically लाक्षागृह जो था उसका जो कंस्ट्रक्शन की जिम्मेदारी थी वो पुरोचन की थी, और पुरोचन ने उसको इस तरीके से बनाया था कि जो कोर मटेरियल यूज किया था वो था लाख, और उसके ऊपर बाकी भी जो चीजें थी दे वर ऑल मेड ऑफ इन्फ्लेमेबल मटेरियल्स. एंड उसके पहले द ओनली थिंग दैट सेव्ड दीज गाइज वाज विदुर सेंड्स अ पर्सन who talks to Yudhishthir in some other tongue, not Sanskrit. And he basically, there is one श्लोक कि भाई ऐसा कुछ है, आप basically वो hint देते हैं. एंड तो ये महाभारत में बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है कि वो मेटाफर्स में भी बहुत अच्छे से बात करते हैं. तो उसमें भी वो है कि भाई किसी तरह खोद के निकलना पड़ेगा, एंड देन दैट हिंट इज इनफ, एंड देन ऑब्वियसली विदुर मैनेजेस टू बेसिकली डू ऑल द सेटअप कि भाई कैसे भागेंगे, कैसे सुरंग कूदेगी, कैसे कहाँ पे नाव तैयार होगी. बाय द वे मोटर बोट का भी मेंशन है यहाँ पे. So they had some technology.
They actually went upstream. They actually went upstream to Varnavat from Hastinapur. Hastinapur जब गए थे, तो they went against the flow of the river on a boat. So that basically
the महाभारत mentions कि वो यंत्र जड़ित नाव थी. वो यंत्र जड़ित, तो essentially it was a motor boat. Which helped them navigate through the river. But coming back to Purochan, so this was the person who actually executed this advice that Karnik gave to Dhritarashtra, and in that eventually what happened, that Purochan also became a victim of this fire, and along with Purochan there were 6 other people who died. So there was a lady who was staying there with 5 of her sons, and they became victim, and everybody thought that they were the Kunti and Pandavas. There is a mention in some versions of Mahabharata that this lady was actually Purochan's sister. So basically वहाँ पे otherwise there was no point of some random lady staying there for no reason, and why would she be? राजा और युवराज लोग रह रहे हैं वहाँ पे, right?
No, there was the story of her poisoning the food also in southern retellings. She poisoned the food, but Bhim, as we already talked about, Bhim liked tadka. Poison ka tadka. So Bhim
तो
would eat
ये
it up.
मैंने भी सुना है कि शीप, तो बेसिकली ऐसा नहीं है क्योंकि बहुत बार ये हमको कई बार लोग बोलते हैं कि बताओ 6 इनोसेंट लोग मर गए, पांडव लोगों ने अपनी जान बचाने के लिए 6 लोग को मरने दिया, ये कोई बड़ी महान बात नहीं है. But from there are various versions of story which actually tells that these were the co-conspirator. Purochin was not the only guy कि वो सब अकेले कर दिया इतना, right? He was the contractor. He needed people who were his close people who could not, because Yudhishthir was very popular. अगर वो मान लो आउटसाइड कॉन्ट्रैक्टर्स को लेके आता तो वो जो कॉन्स्पिरेसी थी वो बराबर से एग्जीक्यूट नहीं हो सकती थी. So it's very likely that Purochin used his family members to execute this. And the idea was to actually, क्योंकि अगर आप फूड पॉइजनिंग कहाँ से आता है उसमें कि they will be fast asleep. अगर आग लगेगी और आदमी तुरंत उठ जाएगा तो they would try to save them, right? So the idea was कि when the palace is put on fire, they should be sleeping, they should be like sedated. So the whole thing was that this lady was probably working there as a cook, disguised as a cook, and tried to sedate them. And Bhim can't get sedated. Bhim though जब कालकूट पी के भी कुछ नहीं हुआ तो that didn't work on him. And that's how they basically and they knew that this was going to happen because of Vidur's information. So Purochin and his family members became a victim of what they were basically setting the trap. They basically got caught on their own trap. So that is where the Purochin importance comes from, because अगर वो कणिक की एडवाइस से धृतराष्ट्र ने वो कर तो लिया, लेकिन युधिष्ठिर इतने पॉपुलर थे, it would have probably been difficult to get someone to be a part of a conspiracy to kill Yudhishthir. And Purochin was a willing participant, and he employed his family members to execute this conspiracy, and eventually all of them died as part of that. तो बोलते हैं ना, किसी का बुरा करने चलो तो खुद का बुरा हो जाता है. So again, another moral in this story: be careful. And now moving to the next character.
Just a quick one. So if you remember in घोष यात्रा के एंड में ना, जो असुर होते हैं वो एक कृत्या भेजते हैं दुर्योधन को लाने के लिए पाताल लोक. सो इन जैन महाभारत उसका एक्सटेंशन है कि जब जब वो वापस दुर्योधन को कृत्या के संग वापस भेजते हैं तो कहते हैं कि कृत्या विल हेल्प यू ट्राई टू विन. तो वो कृत्या सुरोचन, पुरोचन्स ब्रदर,
पुरोचन की बहन.
कि ही इज अ मैजिशियन टाइप. सो लाइक उस इसमें जरा सा झाड़ फूंक वो सब डाला हुआ है. सो इट्स मोर लाइकली वेरी लाइक अ वेरी विलेज टेल व्हिच सॉर्ट ऑफ केम इनटू द स्टोरी. सो कृत्या के संग वो जाते हैं एंड दे स्तंभित कर देते हैं, पर द्रौपदी स्तंभित नहीं हो पाती हैं, धर्मराज स्तंभित नहीं हो पाते हैं. तो वो सुरोचन भी इस तरीके से फेल हो जाता है. तो उसमें कृत्या इज अनएबल टू गेट एनीबडी टू, कृत्या ने बोला कि मेरे को खाना है किसी को. तो सुरोचन उसको पांडवों को खाने को भेजता है, फेल कर जाता है. तो कृत्या आके सुरोचन को ही खा जाती है, फिर चली जाती है. तो
ये फैमिली ट्रेडिशन था मतलब उनका कि जो ट्रैप में खुद ही फंसते थे ये.
बट व्यंग में दूसरा आता है अगली जनरेशन में. जब पुरोचन की जब डेथ हो जाती है तो उसकी बीबी और जो बेटा होता है वो दुर्योधन के पास जाते हैं कि तुम मित्र थे और वो मर गए हैं, उनके लिए कुछ दो. तो दुर्योधन नोस की दे कैन रिवील, तो ही ड्राइव्स देम आउट ऑफ द कंट्री. तो लेटर ऑन वो यही उसकी स्टोरी में ये आता है कि जो लड़का था वो नाई बनता है और वो दुर्योधन की जब 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 सब विडोज होती है ना तो उनके बाल काटता है. तो कहता है कि मेरे फादर का वो. बट दिस इज अगेन ऑल वेरी विलेज लेवल स्टोरीज अगेन. या folk tales.
So Deepak has been waiting very patiently
Sorry.
for his turn, and so without taking more of his time, over to you, Deepak. And you are free to talk about Amba or Animandavya, whichever you decide.
Yes. So continuing from this narration, I'll go fast forward straight to the scene behind you, which is Ranabhumi, the war. So when we talk about the war, so we find that all the action happens after Bhishma dies. So until then, the war is going in like a mechanical way. तो everyday लोग आते हैं, लोग fighting करते हैं और मर जाते हैं. That's it. Nothing major happens. So other than Shweta, Uttara, Airavan, nothing major happens. Bhishma is responsible. So Amba. So who was Amba? Now, if we go to Kashi, which is one of the favorite places where the kings of Hastinapura and other places get their wives. So the king of Kashi had three daughters, Amba, Ambika, and Ambalika. So he was organizing a Swayamvara, and all the kings from across the country had come. And Bhishma arrived there, and he made an announcement. He said that anyway, Swayamvara, we have to prove our strength. So I am going to prove my strength on behalf of my brother. So I am going to take away all the three brides. Stop me if you can. So he takes all of them, puts them in his chariot, and goes away. So naturally, they have to stop. So they all run behind him. But we know Bhishma is the greatest warrior. So he easily defeats them. One of the warrior who fights very strongly is Salva. So he fights very strongly, but no use. Bhishma defeats everyone, and they all go back to Hastinapura. And he tells them, "You are going to get married to my brother Vichitravidya." Then Amba says that no, actually, I wanted to marry Salva. I already selected him, so I had decided that I will choose him. So then Bhishma is a gentleman. He also respects women. So he says, "Okay, you are free. You can go and marry Salva." So, but what happens when she goes to Salva? He rejects her. He says, "Bhishma has taken you and go, so how can I marry you? So go back to him." So now Bhishma will not marry because he has taken the Bhishma Pratigna. So what should she do? So one option is to go back home. So she decides that I will not go back home to my father's home where I will become a joke and a burden. So she goes to an ashrama, and there she meets her grandfather. Her grandfather is Hotravahana, who is her mother's father. So he says, the only person who can give you justice is Parshurama. And by coincidence, Parshurama's friend is there in the ashrama. He is Akritavrana. Now he asks Amba that, "Tell me what happened." She tells the whole story. And after that, he puts the entire blame on Bhishma. He says it is Bhishma who is responsible for your problem, so he should die. You should get him killed. So next day Parshurama comes. So she tells the story and she says, "Kill Parshurama." She does not give him options. She does not say that you make Salva agree to the marriage and all that. She says, "Kills Parshurama." I'm sorry, kill Bhishma. So Parshurama says, "Bhishma is my student, I'll call him." So he calls Parshurama. Parshurama calls Bhishma, and he says that you marry her. He says it's impossible. So then be prepared to die. So Bhishma says, "I'm ready." So the Guru Shishya start fighting, and it is such a great war. It happens for 23 days. So just imagine, Parshurama is none other than Bhagavan Vishnu. But yet Bhishma is so strong, so powerful that for 23 days he stops Parshurama's attack. And finally on the last day, he's about to use a very powerful weapon. But then all the Devas and Rishis stop him. And then they advise Parshurama that you cannot defeat him, so give up. So basically it becomes a draw match, and they decide to go. So Amba in the end gets nothing. So she decides to go to tapas. So she prays to Lord Shiva. And when Shiva comes, she says, "I have only one goal in my life. I want Bhishma to die. So in my next life, I want to kill Bhishma." So Mahadeva says, "Okay, your boon is granted." So then she jumps into the fire and she kills herself. So in the next Janma, she is born as Shikandi. Actually, she is born as Shikandini, a woman. Later on, she becomes Shikandi. So that is, of course, a different story. And as we know, Bhishma tells this story actually to Duryodhana. So there is a sub-chapter called as Amba Upakyana, where he tells all this story. And the reason why Bhishma did not fight with Shikandi was not because he was Amba, but because he was born as a woman called Shikandi. But the story is that Amba was Shikandi's past. So Amba plays a very role in the Mahabharata and the Bharata.
Thanks, Deepak. Amba's story is very interesting, and the weapon that Deepak talked about, this weapon is called Prastopastra, which was basically the weapon of Vasus. And Bhishma, being the incarnation of one of the Vasus, was aware of this weapon, but it was probably in his subconscious somewhere. So on the last day or night previous to that day, Vasus come to his dream and they tell him कि भाई you have this which can't be countered by Parashuram, and Bhishma is hesitant ki I should not be using this. So then they say ki it's non-fatal. Don't worry, Bhishma, your guru Parashuram will not die, and then you can use Pragyastra to revive him once he is unconscious and once you are declared a victor. But then God stopped the game match, and Narad Muni and Rishi Krit Muni and all these come and they say, "Why draw? Don't go any further. You don't want to get into the situation which will come after this." So वो मैंने किस लिए बताया ये वेपन्स के बारे में, क्योंकि जब आप रणभूमि गेम खेलेंगे तो उसमें इस तरीके के वेपन आपको मिलेंगे. तो प्रज्ञास्त्र का कार्ड भाई हमने बनाया है. तो हमारे उसमें सम्मोहनास्त्र और प्रमोहनास्त्र करके दो अस्त्र हैं जिनको आप यूज करके अपने एनिमी को आप ब्लॉक कर सकते हैं. लेकिन अगर आपके एनिमी के पास प्रज्ञास्त्र है तो वो सम्मोहनास्त्र और प्रमोहनास्त्र के असर से आपको रिवाइव कर सकता है. तो इसीलिए रणभूमि गेम खरीदिए. नीचे टिकर में आप देख सकते हैं playranbhumi.com पे वेबसाइट पे जाइए, प्री बुक करिए. 15 अप्रैल से हम लोग ये शिप करना स्टार्ट करेंगे. और कल जो कहीं सुनी का एपिसोड होगा उसमें हम लोग रणभूमि गेम के बारे में बात करेंगे डिटेल में. बट विदाउट गेटिंग टू मच इनटू रणभूमि राइट नाउ, लेट्स गो टू द रणभूमि ऑफ कुरुक्षेत्र ऑफ व्यास, and let's talk about another important character which played a very key role in that Kurukshetra battle, and most of the modern retellings have actually forgotten to cast that character itself. And the character I am talking about is Bhurishrava. He is a very important character. He was a Kuru. He was a cousin. I mean, basically, Shantanu had an elder brother called Bahlik, who basically builds another kingdom, and that kingdom is also known by the name of Bahlik, and that is why Shantanu becomes the king of Hastinapur. And the Bahalik's lineage, you have Somadatta and Bhurishrava, and Somadatta had a fight with the Shinis of the Vrishni clan. This happened during the Swamvar of Devaki. So the Devaki wanted to marry Vasudev, and there was a fight broke out where Somdatta was defeated and humiliated by Shini. So Somdatta, and again, sorry to cut this story at this moment. I want to go back to what Deepak was talking about Bhagwan Shankar. So महाभारत में अगर बहुत सारे लोग देखते हैं कि it's all about Shri Krishna and Vishnu ji, but there are many places. So even Mahadev also has a small role, big impact in Mahabharat. Maybe we can do another session where we can talk about the mentions and the influence of Mahadev in the entire Mahabharat. So one of the mention of Mahadev is in the story of Khandavan, where the Shvetaki actually is doing yajna to Mahadev, which starts a wheel of chain of actions that lead to one thing through another. Then another mention of Mahadev is when Amba prays to Mahadev. किसी को भी रिवेंज चाहिए होता था तो वो महादेव के पास जाते थे, बून चाहिए होता था तो वो महादेव के पास. जयद्रथ also goes to महादेव कि भाई मुझे वरदान दो. So Mahadev has a very important role, and in the
Pandavas are born because of Mahadev, the 5 Indras.
So in the story of
Draupadi is marrying 5 because of Mahadev.
Yes, so we will probably do one more session.
Yeah.
We will probably do one more session where we will talk about Mahadev in Mahabharat, and that would be another interesting session. But now coming back to Bhurishrava's story. So Somdatta, after he is humiliated by Shini, he prays to Mahadev and he wants a son who will avenge his humiliation. And this leads to the battle of Kurukshetra, where Bhurishrava is fighting for his cousins, the Kauravas, and Pandava are accompanied by Shini's grandson, who is Satyaki. So this gangs of Vasipur plays along generations. बाप का दादा का सबका बदला लेगा वाला situation. So Bhurishrava वहां पे है कि मैं लूंगा अपने बाप का दादा का बदला. And this वहां पे Bhurishrava और सात्यकी के बीच में बहुत सारे duels होते हैं. Even there are situations where Bhurishrava kills Satyaki's sons. So Satyaki ka obviously there is a build up कि भाई Bhurishrava and all the sons of Satyaki are killed by Bhurishrava in the battle. So Satyaki also is hyped up. Now comes the main event which actually changes the course of history, and it goes beyond Mahabharat ka war also, beyond Kurukshetra war also. So what happens on the 14th day? when Arjun is chasing Jayadratha and he is busy, there is a time comes when Satyaki is sent by Yudhishthir to go and check on Arjun. And Satyaki goes in, and on the way he is stopped by Bhurishrava, and a battle ensues. Before that, Satyaki has a battle with, I think, Karn or someone, and he is already very tired when he faces Bhurishrava. And Bhurishrava manages to defeat Satyaki, and Satyaki is almost unconscious. And Bhurishrava drags Satyaki, he kicks him, basically जो सोमदत्त के साथ शीनी ने किया था, एंड जिसका बदला भूरी लेने के लिए भूरिश्रवा पैदा हुए थे, भूरिश्रवा does that. Bhurishrava kicks Satyaki, and now he basically is about to kill Satyaki, and that is when the best friend Arjun notices this, and he cuts the arm of Bhurishrava. एंड भूरिश्रवा बेसिकली कॉल्स आउट कि तुमने मुझे ऐसे कैसे मार दिया, तुमने मुझे चैलेंज नहीं किया, ये तो रूल्स में नहीं है. तो वो बोलता है, भाई मेरा दोस्त मर रहा था, मैं उसको बचाने के लिए कुछ भी करूंगा, मुझे रूल्स का ज्ञान मत दो. तुम मेरे दोस्त को, जो कि हु इज नॉट इवन फाइटिंग बैक, तुम क्या रूल्स का मुझे ज्ञान दे रहे हो. एंड देन भूरिश्रवा एक तरीके से अनशन में बैठ जाते हैं कि भाई ये गलत हो रहा है मेरे साथ, या वट एवर. ही प्रोबेबली, बिकॉज ही इज ऑल्सो रिमाइंडेड अबाउट व्हाट दे डिड टू अभिमन्यु, so he is probably repenting or he is probably protesting, whatever happens, but he basically sits, he drops his weapon, and एक हाथ तो वैसे ही कट गया तो वेपन तो उसमें पकड़ नहीं सकते. He sits there, and then Satyaki comes back, stands up, and he cuts out Bhurishrava's head. And then everybody is like, what is this? How could you do that to an unarmed warrior? And then Satyaki gives his justification, and Sri Krishna intervenes and says, nahi, kuch nahi, all. Well, Sri Krishna always played this role. When similar thing happens with Drishtadyumna and Dronacharya later on, this was probably a precursor to that event. And many people don't know this because this was not shown on probably television screens. As I said,
He's not
character
there in
ही
any serials.
एग्जैक्टली वो कैरेक्टर ही नहीं है, ना सात्यकी का कैरेक्टर है, ना भूरिश्रवा का कैरेक्टर है, क्योंकि वो शायद महाभारत का सीक्वल बनाने का प्लान नहीं कर रहे थे. दे वर नॉट प्लानिंग हरिवंश. अगर वो कर रहे होते तो दैट कम्स द नेक्स्ट पार्ट ऑफ द स्टोरी. 36 years later, when Kritvarma and Satyaki are together, they start fighting with each other, and Kritvarma taunts Satyaki for what he did to Bhurishrava on that day. कि यू किल्ड एन अनकॉन्शियस वॉरियर, तुम बड़े वॉरियर बनते हो, बड़े चैंपियन बनते हो, दिस इज व्हाट योर ट्रुथ इज. एंड देन सात्यकी आल्सो taunts him what Kritvarma did to Abhimanyu, and this leads to
and the night battle.
And the night, yes, what Kritvarma did to all these people after the 18th day of the war, when Ashwathama along with Kritvarma and Kripacharya attacked the Panchal camp and killed everyone, while Kritvarma and Kripacharya protested obviously, but they then eventually participated. So वो protest आपका ठीक है, register हो गया, but you actually were standing a guard at the gate and killing everyone who is trying to escape, तो आपका participation कम नहीं है. So आपका जो you can't escape that. So this both warriors taunting each other becomes the tipping point for the Yadava civil war. And all these Yadavas, when they start fighting each other, basically people say that Gandhari's curse came into reality, became reality, and all these Yadavas fought and died. And I always maintain that while Gandhari did curse Sri Krishna, but in all likelihood, Sri Krishna himself sown the seed of this thing when he asked Kritvarma and his Narayani Sena to fight against him in the battle and for Kaurav. And coincidentally, not coincident, as a strategy, Satyaki was chosen to counter Kritvarma in the battle. On the first day when the strategy was being decided and they were pitting one-on-one, Satyaki was pitted against Kritvarma. And that also probably played a role, but Satyaki killing Bhurishrava and Kritvarma taunting Satyaki about that event became the event which led to the destruction of Dwarka and the Yadav civil war and killing of all these Yadav, I mean Sri Krishna's sons and grandsons in that battle, because Pradyumna and all these guys, they sided with Satyaki, and then there were other Bhoj warriors and all these who sided with Kritvarma, and eventually the Yadav clan got destroyed. So that is why Bhurishrava's role becomes very important. and it is unfortunate that he is not chosen. Because, and one more thing, I don't know this for sure, but if Danvir Shabd has been used for anyone in
Yup Ketu.
Mahabharata, it has been,
It's Bhurishrava. Yup
it's
Ketu.
Bhurishrava.
He's constantly
So
doing Dan.
everybody believes, everybody thinks that Karn was the greatest Danvir in Mahabharata, while Danvir शब्द has not been used for Karn in that context. कि वो ये बोला है कि भाई आप सुबह जाओगे तो वो दान देगा, but दानवीर जो term यूज किया गया है वो भूरिश्रवा के लिए यूज किया गया है. So he must have been a very prominent figure and very nice guy of those times, and you will get to know more about Bhurishrava also, because when you play Ranbhumi, and you will see that we have assigned a insignia to his flag, and you can see the flag also on the board when you play it. So please, next is Bhagdat, because he was also a very important character.
Can I interject 1 minute?
Yes, Pranshu.
Yeah, so they say that, so there's this Colonel Todd has told a story that the Bhurishrava's hand, the arm which was cut off by Arjun, was taken by a by a by a uh, eagle, and then dropped inside a lake. And then in around 1709, they were cleaning up and they found that the Bajuband of Kritvarma of Bhurishrava with 13 interlocking shivlings. And then 100 years later, those shivlings are across India in different temples. And so there was a story how those things came along. I wrote a fictitious story, which you can find it in Flight of Deities.
Yes, important to plug our work.
So it actually starts from the same Bhurishrava, that the whole story. So Bhurishrava is very important, literally.
Thank God you did not took us to the King Arthur legend कि वो आर्म तलवार के साथ लेके लंदन चले गए थे और वहां पे then this boy Arthur pulls it off from a rock. But that's why eagle आया तो it could fly across continents also. So, but interesting. Please do read Flight of Deities. It's a good book, a collection of 10 stories about destruction of our temples, and in some cases reconstruction also, and how we saved our deities and how we preserved our heritage, our culture. Important that we know about these stories, and we know about the history. Knowing the history is basically avoiding repeating it. So next is Bhagdat.
Gaurav, just wanted to add one point to your Bhurishrava story. Day 14 becomes significant because of two things. One is Arjun is avenging the death of his son, Abhimanyu. Satyaki avenged the death of 10 of his sons. So when you look at it from that context, killing Bhurishrava doesn't seem so bad. I mean, killing Bhurishrava, who was trying to kill him when he was unconscious, does not seem so bad when you realize that 10 of his sons were killed in front of his eyes by the same Bhurishrava. We accept Arjun avenging Abhimanyu's death, but we don't accept Satyaki avenging 10 of his sons.
Yeah,
So
when Satyaki
no, but
in Dakshinatya, they say that the gods showered like flowers on him. So in Dakshinatya, Shlok is there.
Satyaki's justification is that he had promised to himself, and he is basically just fulfilling that promise, and there is nothing wrong in it. It's not the rule of the battle that it gets involved. The same thing is invoked when Bhim breaks Duryodhan's thigh, right? Okay, by battlefield is fine, but I had made a promise that I will break his thigh, and I will break his thigh. It's my personal dharma that I have to follow also. Which is again, like, there are multiple occasions when the dharma's definition becomes very subtle or very complex also in many cases, and these are those situations when you see this play in front of you, and that is why reading it in detail and understanding the explanation, especially when Sri Krishna explains it, because that is voice of God, right? So when he is giving an explanation, it's basically a common audience, common reader would feel कि अरे ये क्या किया है तो गलत किया या ये तो सही किया. There is a confusion, there is a dharma sankat in the reader's mind कि भाई ये जो हो रहा है ये सही हो रहा है, सही ऐसा कर सकते हैं नहीं कर सकते हैं, and then Krishna's voice becomes the voice of explanation, which tells you ki why it is right or why it is wrong, and in what context this can be taken as the right thing to do, and in what context the same thing can be taken in the wrong context. And that is why it's very important to not only read Mahabharata to understand it. And this is one of those situations where this situation comes where will get confused. Similar to situation of Yudhishthir saying Ashwathama Hatul. It's very similar situation, right? But again, Yudhishthir's personal thing was impacted, right? उसमें बोलते हैं ना युधिष्ठिर का रथ ऊपर चलता था but वो जमीन में आ गया. So he suffered the consequences of that. But in the greater scheme of things, he did the right thing. So it's basically very important to listen to Krishna's voice throughout this, and that becomes the explanation point. Anyway, let's not stop too much on Bhuri Srava. Go to Bhagdat. Very important character, again not shown in most of the modern retellings. But why Bhagdat is important and why we need to know about him. So next is Bhagdat.
Okay, since we are talking about Ranbhoomi and also about our books, I want to show one more book. This is called
Yes.
Unsung Valor. So three of us are there in this book, Pranshu, Bharti, and me. So we have written stories in that. So this is about great heroes from the Mahabharata, but rather great warriors who are not known much because they have not been seen in the TV shows or spoken about. So one of them is Bhagadat. So Bhagadat is the king of Pragjyotisha, which they say is modern Assam, but of course there are a lot of issues there because it is shown that Pragjyotisha also has the Himalayas, also has the ocean. So probably it's a very large kingdom, and Bhagadatta is the son of Narakasura, whom everyone knows because we celebrate Deepavali, particularly in South India, as the killing of Naraka. So Naraka was
North
killed
में
by
छोटी
Krishna.
दीपावली बोलते हैं.
हाँ, Choti Deepavali. So Naraka was killed by Krishna, and Krishna made Bhagadatta the next king. Bhumi Devi takes Bhagadatta to Krishna and she asks him for his blessing. So obviously Bhagadatta will be angry with Krishna because he killed his father. So then what happens? Arjuna comes there during his Digvijaya Yatra for the Rajasuya Yatra. So Bhagadatta is not going to surrender so easily. He is a great warrior. And another interesting thing, he is the friend of both Pandu and Indra. And Arjuna comes, they start fighting. So it takes 8 days for Arjuna to win this war. So it shows how powerful Bhagadatta was. And after 8 days, what happens? Bhagadatta runs out of weapons. He doesn't have anything. So then he says, okay, let me give up. So he tells, what do you want? So Arjuna says, you give a tribute, accept Yudhishthira's rule and come to the Yajna. And by the way, Bhagadatta comes to the Yajna, they don't allow him. That's, of course, a different story. So either there was so much of traffic or
he says there's so much traffic that he couldn't get inside.
He couldn't get inside, but he gives the tribute and goes away. So maybe
And he was Indra's friend also, right? So
yeah, he was Indra's and friend of both the fathers of Arjuna. So then when the war starts, naturally he goes to Kaurava side because Arjuna has defeated him. He wants to try and take revenge, and Krishna also probably he wants to take revenge. So one key feature of Bhagadatta is he has a very powerful elephant called Supratika. So it is the largest elephant on earth at that time, supposed to be related to Airavata of Indra. So they create panic. So he comes on different days of the war. So on day 7, he defeats Ghatotkacha. Day 8, he defeats both father and son. Even Bhima he defeats. He just crushes and destroys his chariot. Then day 13 is day 11 is very important because that is when Bhagadatta creates panic. So what happens on that day, day 12, was that the Drona plans that he should try and capture Yudhishthira, and the some Shaptakas led by Susharma, they take away Arjuna and Krishna. So here during the war, Bhagadatta goes on the rampage with his elephant. So he defeats everyone. He defeats Ghatotkacha, and then he defeats Bhima. He destroys his chariot. Now Bhima goes under his elephant and tries to hit the elephant, but then he realizes he cannot do much. So he also leaves. And then Bhima comes back with his chariot again, but the elephant blows away the chariot. And then he destroys Satyaki's chariot. He defeats Yudhishthira. He defeats Abhimanyu. But then there is so much of hangama going on that Arjuna and Krishna see it. So this actually gives the idea for the next day, that they should go so far that Arjuna and Krishna cannot see what is happening and do not come back. So that of course leads to Abhimanyu's death. So finally Arjuna comes and he fights with Bhagadatta. It's a great war. Bhagadatta even brings down Arjuna's crown. So he throws a spear, it hits his crown and falls down. But finally Arjuna prevails, he cuts off his hand. And there is one interesting story, that he was so old that all the skin on his forehead had fallen down. It was blocking his vision. So he had tied a cloth over it. So Arjuna shoots an arrow and hits that cloth. It is not there in critical edition, but some other editions. The cloth comes off and he cannot see. So then what happens? So he takes the Vaishnavastra. So that is the most powerful weapon which Bhumi Devi had ensured that he had. So he releases it. But Vaishnavastra is Vishnu's weapon, and Vishnu is sitting there in front of Arjuna. So Vishnu gets up, Krishna gets up, and the weapon becomes a garland, Vaijayanti Mala, and falls on his head. So then Arjuna actually criticizes. He says, "Why did you get involved?" He says, "No one could have defeated it. You could not have stopped that astra. That's why I had to step in." And lastly, Arjuna does something surprising. He stops, he gets down, he goes before Bhagadatta, and he takes one round around his body. So it shows how much respect he had for him as a warrior. So Bhagadatta, he had a small role. He comes in 2 or 3 places, but he had a big impact, which is shown by the fact that he created a lot of chaos on one day of the war, and there were certain things that happened which led to the next day, which was Abhimanyu. So this is about Bhagadatta. It is there in this book. So if you want to read his story, then you can please buy Unsung Valor.
And one more thing about, thank you, Deepak. One more thing about Bhagdat and his role was that on 12th day, Bhagdat, while Arjun was engaged in fighting Bhagdat, Dronacharya was actively trying to capture Yudhishthir. And Sri Krishna stops Vaishnavastra, and then Arjun manages to kill Bhagdat, and then he rushes back. And Dronacharya has to take a step back and stop this. So Dronacharya's that elevation of frustration happens because of this also, कि भाई इतना सारा मैंने किया, प्लान किया, सब तक इन्वॉल्व किए, भगदत्त को इन्वॉल्व किया, सारा कुछ किया, भीम को हरा दिया उसने, सब कुछ तबाही मचा दी, लेकिन फिर भी मैं युधिष्ठिर को नहीं पकड़ पाया. And that leads to the Chakravyuh strategy on day 13. And रात में basically if you रीड महाभारत, दुर्योधन और द्रोणाचार्य के बीच में बड़ा ही हीटेड कन्वर्सेशन होता है कि क्या है, आपसे कुछ हो नहीं रहा है, आप क्या हो, यू आर स्टिल हैविंग अ सॉफ्ट कॉर्नर, मैंने सेनापति बना के गलती तो नहीं करी, ऑल दैट हैपेंस. तो वो द्रोणाचार्य का जो एक वो होता है ना टिपिकल एम्प्लॉय वाला बिहेवियर की बॉस ने डांट दिया तो मैं कल कुछ एक्स्ट्रा करके दिखाऊंगा, अप्रेजल में एक्स्ट्रा पॉइंट चाहिए, सो ही डज दैट. And this also shows Dronacharya versus Bhim अगर comparison करें, and that could be another topic for such conversations, कि Bhishma was very composed in his strategies. He did not panic.
Commander. Yeah.
He was a very seasoned commander. He has probably fought many battles. Dronacharya का था impulsive strategy.
First battle.
द्रोणाचार्य का स्ट्रेटजी मतलब फर्स्ट बैटल नहीं, मतलब विराट युद्ध वगैरह में ठीक है, छोटे मोटे माइनर स्क्रिमिशेस किए थे, but essentially at that scale, at that size of the army and with those kind of stakes, he had never fought those kind of battles, and that shows his strategy was very impulsive. And it shows that that is what led to him breaking a lot of rules, and that is what led to Krishna saying कि भाई अभी इनको रेड कार्ड देके बाहर निकालो, ये बहुत फाउल कर दिया इन्होंने, and even literally given red card कि भाई आप बाहर जाइए, आपसे अभी नहीं खेल सकते, आप इस गेल का रूल खराब कर रहे हैं. So anyways, now everybody.
Yeah, but actually that's a good comparison between Bhishma and Drona also, in the sense that रोज रात को तो दुर्योधन का मोटिवेशनल स्पीच होता ही था, जो भी कमांडर होता था, भीष्म को भी सुनाता था वो, लेकिन भीष्म नेवर रिएक्टेड दैट बैडली एंड वेंट टोटली ऑफ ट्रैक. लेकिन द्रोण को पहले दिन से ही व्हेन दुर्योधन स्टार्टेड गिविंग हिम हिज यूजुअल लैमेंट एट नाइट कि आप ठीक से नहीं युद्ध कर रहे हो, आप उनको सपोर्ट कर रहे हो, आप बहुत खराब हो, ये हो, द्रोण यूज्ड टू टेक इट अपने ईगो पे ले लेते थे, और अगले दिन ही वुड गो एक्स्ट्रा माइल टू डू ऑल सॉर्ट्स ऑफ थिंग्स. उनको कंट्रोल नहीं रहता. Whereas
all the
we
I think
technical
never.
errors
वो
Drona does is basically run
Yeah,
because of
he's
that.
provoked very easily.
so
His
Bhishma
ego
did
comes
not
into the
have.
picture.
I think Bhishma did not have anything to prove to Duryodhan,
हाँ,
while
correct.
Drona had to, right?
He
Bhishma
had.
को ये नहीं था कि भाई मैं यहाँ नहीं कर पाया तो क्या होगा, मेरा अप्रेजल खराब हो जाएगा. Drona was more like कि यार I have to
Yeah.
do it. I have to prove myself. I have never proven myself
Correct.
before this. So what I was saying, that everybody was picking up, talking about their work. I talked about Ranbhoomi board game. Deepak talked about the work on the book. Pranshu talked about the work on his book. Let us give Bharti also an opportunity to talk about her book, but we will not ask Bharti to speak. You can hold the book, and then I want Pranshu to talk about Alambush and talk about how it is connected to Bharti's story and why I'm asking Bharti to hold the book.
I
It's okay,
I think
Deepak can hold it
Deepak
on
can
your
do that,
behalf.
yeah.
It's the
Yes.
same book.
So can you hear me? Sorry. Yeah. So Bharti basically wrote about Iravan in our book, the Unsung Valor. So Iravan was killed by Alambush, and Alambush is a very interesting character here. So there were actually several Alambush in the battlefield. So that's another very important thing. Even in Karn Parv, when Sanjay is narrating all the warriors who had died, he mentions Rishyashrang's son and Alayuth and Alambush. So there were actually several of these Alambush. One Alambush was the son of Jatasur. Jatasur was a Rakshas. He was actually a member of Pandav court, and he basically went with them to exile also. पर वनवास में ही चेंज साइड्स, ही डिसाइडेड टू कि खुद लाइक बॉस तो शायद कुछ और करेंगे नहीं, तो मैं उन्हीं को लूटता हूँ. एंड अलम्बुश वाज फ्रॉम मदर, सो एक्चुअली वो नकुल सहदेव की साइड से था. सो देयर वाज एक्चुअली अ थिंग अबाउट सहदेव आल्सो, सहदेव सॉर्ट ऑफ ड्रैगिंग हिम अवे. तो जब वो जटासुर को मारते हैं, तो जटासुर वाज अवे फ्रॉम द आश्रम वेयर दे हैड टेकन रेफ्यूज. So that's another very important thing. कि wherever they would, Pandavas would try to follow all the rules possible as such. कि आप किसी के घर में हैं तो आप वहां पे नहीं करेंगे दंगा, आप बाहर जाके करेंगे. तो वो जो चीज है वो बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट, वो थ्रू इट. Jatasur's son Alambush comes and fights on the side of and he's killed by Ghatotkacha. Then there is Rishyashrang's son Alambush, who also comes and fights. And actually on the 14th day, most of the fighting from chapter about 140 to chapter 176 of the Drona Parv is Alambush. It's Alambush all over the place. Right night, he's fighting with the Akshani of Rakshasas, and he's fighting very much, and he basically defeats a lot of them because of the night. But eventually he's killed by Ghatotkacha. Then there is Alayudh. Alayudh का भी काफी mention आता है. Alayudh is killed by, on that night, on the 14th night, actually there's a lot of confusion. So the Satyaki kills another king called Alambush. Arjun kills in chapter 167 another king, another Rakshas king called Alambush. So it basic. Okay, so the thing is कि in Mahabharat, another place, brother of Alambush is mentioned, Alambal, who also dies in the battlefield. So Alambal is one of the, so in Vayu Puran you are given the list of these 10 type of Kashyap से खच होते हैं. खच से जो 10 तरह के राक्षस जो होते हैं, उसमें आलम्बे राक्षस आते हैं. So ये Alambushas basically are part of it. And but हमारे जो ऋष्यशृंग वाले Alambush हैं, जो जिन्होंने so it is actually very difficult to tell कि इरावान को किसने मारा था. अच्छा, Alambush is also the brother of Bak, Kirmir, and Alayudh. So there are 4 brothers at least, or 5 now, because we know Alambal is another name of a brother. So in this context, there are basically Kirmir, Bakasur को कहते हैं, वो basically it was Sholay in Mahabharat. वो गांव में गए, 5 लोग, कितने आदमी थे, वहां पे उन्होंने बकासुर को मारा. वहां से उसके बाद कहते हैं जब वो वनवास निकाले गए तो किरमीर के संग युद्ध हुआ 11वें चैप्टर में वन पर्व के, उसमें उन्होंने किरमीर का वध किया. और बकासुर का एक बेटा भी था, उसको भी बाद में बकासुर का एक और बेटा भीषण आता है अश्वमेध पर्व में, वो दैट्स मच लेटर. सो अलम्बुश इज, सो बकासुर का एक और भाई आता है ये अलायुध, एंड अलायुध का ब्रदर कहा गया है अलम्बुश. So basically they are all maybe not brothers, they are just part of that Alambaye, as I said कि Alambaye राक्षसों की जो फैमिली है, and they are also related very strongly. Rishyashrang's Alambush is also related strongly with the family of Hidimba. He's called Shalkantakata. Hidimba is called Shalkantakit. It's like there's another k बीच में और न sound आती है, so it's very difficult to pronounce that way. So Shalkantaki, I mean, I'm just missing another one k, n, k in that, but so they are related also. So Ghatotkacha killing them is also a very big important part of it. Ghatotkacha is rejecting his roots. There's a very nice part of it is showing कि I am not going to follow the thing. अच्छा, ऊपर से ऋष्यशृंग जो नाम है इसमें, ये लोग ये सोचते हैं कि ये ऋष्यशृंग राम के जीजा जी. There are many Rishyashrang actually mentioned in the stories and Purans and everything. This Rishyashrang is most likely a name for Rakshas. Rishyashrang का मतलब होता है unicorn, literally एक सींग, one horn. So राक्षस जो होते हैं उनको हम दिखाते हैं ना महिषासुर की तरह दो सींग के लिए, तो हो सकता है एक सींग का ये कॉन्टेक्स्ट हुआ कि वो पहले हार चुका है कहीं पे ऋष्यशृंग, तो अलम्बुश वगैरह तो इसीलिए अलम्बुश आया लड़ने के लिए. जो अलम्बुश जिन्होंने वध किया था इरावान के संग जो लड़ाई की थी, ही द मैजिशियन, वो मैजिशियन थ्रू आउट दिखाया है. तो जो अलम्बुश हैं उसमें जो अलायुध हैं उनके जो घोड़े हैं वो घोड़े नहीं है, वो गधे यूज करते हैं. ही यूजेस एसेस एक्चुअली, नॉट गधे भी, खच्चर. एंड बट अलम्बुश जो मैजिशियन है वो पिशाच यूज करता है, उसके जो घोड़े हैं वो घोड़े नहीं है, वो पिशाच हैं. So he has got a much more powerful Rath and everything. So that's why even on the 9th day, he goes and he fights all the 5 Draupadis and he defeats them. Defeats all the same. Abhimanyu comes in and then helps them out. So basically, Alambush is a very big warrior throughout. And his main part was that first indicator, as I said ना, कि पहले 10 दिन तक कुछ ज्यादा हो नहीं रहा था. जब इरावान की डेथ होती है तो अर्जुन भी जरा दुखी तो होते हैं. भीम उस पे गुस्सा होके 17 कौरव भाई मारते हैं. तो वो जो इट इज अ सॉर्ट ऑफ अ ट्रिगर पॉइंट.
सेवेंथ डे
ना एट्थ डे
सॉरी,
हाँ, वो 4th डे को 8 मारते हैं, 8th डे को 16, मतलब कि वो बेसिकली 17, मतलब कि वो कहे 16, वो कहें 16 बट नाम 17 आते हैं वहां पे. तो दैट्स अ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग आल्सो जस्ट अ पोजीशन कि आपका क्वार्टर तो यहाँ पे खत्म हो गया 8th डे को, बट देन ओनली द नेक्स्ट 14 डे.
सो प्रांशु, हम लोग 1 hour मार्क क्रॉस कर गए हैं, तो लेट अस मूव टू द नेक्स्ट एंड फाइनल कैरेक्टर ऑफ टुडेज सेशन. But just to say why Alambush's role is important, I think because he was responsible for the first Pandav son to die in the battle. That was, and Iravan, Iravan battle performance has been captured by Bharti in this book, and it's a beautiful story. Now moving to Bharti, and we have not talked about women characters today, any of them. So today we will before we close, we will talk about Dushala, and she was Duryodhan's sister, and she was the only daughter among 107 brothers, or 106 because Karna did not know about the relationship. So 100 Kauravas, 1 Yutsu, and 5 Pandavas, and there was only one girl among them, that was Dushala. So she was definitely very loved, and how that love affected the events of Mahabharat, which came later, is probably what is very important. So Bharti, over to you.
So when we talk about Dushala, I think it's important to mention what happens after the war also during Ashwamedh, when Arjun actually fights with her. She's married to Jayadratha, and Arjun actually fights with that clan later on also, and it is Dushala who saves the clan there because obviously they're getting thrashed, and she comes out and she appeals to him as a brother, and he obviously quits the battle and he invites them to the Ashwamedh Yag. and the ally builds there again with a kingdom that has been an enemy. So that is the relationship between Dushala and the Pandavas, which she has retained despite Jayadratha having fought on that side. She has retained that affectionate bond with the Pandavas later on also, which is very significant. So Dushala becomes very important for the Mahabharata, impacting a lot of events because of this, because of the affection between her and the Pandavas. Because what one of the major events that happens is Jayadratha tries to kidnap Draupadi when the Pandavas are in exile, and he does get away with her also because the Pandavas are not around. And after he goes, the Pandavas realize that Draupadi has been kidnapped, and they chase after him, and he's obviously caught. Bhim is going to kill him, but then Arjun stops him, brings him back to Yudhishthir, and the only reason that he is allowed to go away alive is because he's Dushala's husband. So if the Dushala factor had not been there, Jayadratha would have died right there. And if Jayadratha had died there, there was no question of him then going to Mahadev and asking for a boon where he can avenge the insult that apparently he's been meted out. And Mahadev giving him a boon that except for Arjun, you can defeat, you can keep everybody else, the other four Pandavas at bay for one day during battle. And this is what leads to the death of Abhimanyu. Otherwise, if Bhim had been allowed to go into the Chakravyuh behind Abhimanyu, because Abhimanyu has broken open the Chakravyuh, Bhim does not need to know how to break it. So if Bhim had been allowed to go in behind Abhimanyu, Abhimanyu would not have died. If he had not died, then day 14 would not have happened, where 7 Akshauhinis got wiped out, and the Kauravas very pretty much know what is going to be like from that day on. Several things happen on day 14. But if you track it back, if Jayadratha had not stopped the rest of the Pandavas, had not been able to stop the rest of the Pandavas on day 13, Abhimanyu would not have died and that would not have happened. Jayadratha was able to stop it because he was left alive during the exile when he tried to, when he kidnapped Draupadi. And the only reason he was left alive was because of Dushala. So Dushala plays she doesn't even appear in that scene, but still her impact there is quite enormous. I think.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at Dushala's appearance in the Mahabharata, they are very limited. But her impact is seen at multiple places. I mean, one place where she prominently appears is after the war during that Ashwamedh episode, where her son dies out of fear when he sees Arjuna, and then Dushala negotiates the peace treaty with him, and then they basically accompany Arjun for the Ashwamedh Yajna. But it was obviously because of Dushala. I mean, द्रौपदी के साथ बहुत बुरा हो चुका था ऑलरेडी, तो ये टॉलरेट नहीं किया जाता अगर he was not Dushala's husband.
They also killed 6 of Jayadratha's brothers and 12 of his 12 other Savir and Sindhu princes. So Dushla ke other, maybe sons of Dushla, but other sons of Jayadratha, they did kill in that whole battle, and all the friends and everything of Jayadratha.
So, yes, so he was basically traveling with his entourage, and there is an entire. In fact, Jayadratha और द्रौपदी के बीच में fight भी होती है, where Draupadi pushes Jayadratha, and Jayadratha falls like a block. So it shows that Draupadi was physically very strong also. It was not Draupadi was not.
कीचक को भी गिराया था.
कीचक को भी ढकेल दिया. So Draupadi was physically very strong. She pushes Jayadratha, and Jayadratha falls on a distance away. And she also pushes कीचक, and कीचक also falls away. So
Bhim से pointers लेती थी द्रौपदी शायद.
नहीं, and she only surrendered at Jayadratha case was because Dhamme and other people were there. They would have heard them basically. She wasn't alone. Like, that's one of the.
She looks at Yudhishthir and realizes that he wants to forgive Jayadratha because of Dushala, and she doesn't want to go against the king, which shows her political acumen actually.
So interesting point that this when I was talking to Semanti, and I asked this question to her कि why basically युधिष्ठिर जो इतना दुनिया भर में इतना forgiveness उन्होंने फैला रखी थी, उससे इतना नुकसान हुआ उनको eventually, how does she explain that? And she has done a lot of research on Yudhishthir, right? She is writing the trilogy. So she gave an explanation ki because he was essentially Duryodhan's in-law, right? Brother-in-law. and had they killed him in jungle, nobody would have known what has happened in the jungle. And then Duryodhan, while because सब लोग तो ये जंगल में है, they are not diplomatic, maintaining diplomatic relations or anything, and Duryodhan is actively managing diplomatic relations, and he utilizes Shishupal's death for his advantage to set up the Dyut and everything. He could have done the same with Jayadrat's death. So even from that perspective, Yudhishthir's decision at that point makes sense. In hindsight, we can claim that Yudhishthir ने नहीं करता तो ये नहीं होता, but कुछ और होता. और वो जो कुछ और होता वो उससे बुरा भी हो सकता था, उससे अच्छा भी हो सकता है इनके पास 4 अक्षर नहीं होती 7 की बजाय, right? Because then probably they would have had more allies. Maybe Matsya also would have thought कि यार क्यों
जयद्रथ के जो संग थे, शिवी के राजकुमार थे, तिगत के राजकुमार थे, केकय के थे, कारुष के थे. कारुष, केकय और शिवी पांडव साइड आते हैं despite their राजकुमार्स being killed in this Jayadratha incident, because now the information is known.
So I'm saying because this leaving Jayadratha alive had some advantage even from that political point of view also, because Pandavas were living in jungle and Yudhishthir had always known, at least that is what I believe, that Yudhishthir also knew that he has to prepare for the war because it is impending, and that is why Arjun is sent on a quest for divine weapons and all these things happen. Because Yudhishthir को पता था कि उसको 13 साल बाद लड़ना है, तो whatever he did, even the choice of Matsya for Agyatwas was also very tactical choice, because Matsya was a kingdom who would stand up to Kauravas when the need be, and that is why they chose that kingdom. ऐसा नहीं कि कहीं पे भी वो अंग पे भी जाके छुप जाते हैं, because लोग बोलते हैं ना कि आप कहाँ नहीं ढूंढोगे उसको, जो अगर वो हस्तिनापुर में रह रहे होते तो it would have been more difficult to find. Duryodhan would never look in Hastinapur की कहाँ है. But they chose these things because Yudhishthir was very much politically very savvy. ऐसा राजसूय यज्ञ ऐसे नहीं कर लिया था उसने. He was the king essentially. उसका रोल डाउन प्ले हो जाता है क्योंकि it's all about battles, wars and everything. डिप्लोमेसी पे उतना टाइम नहीं स्पेंड किया, और जहां पे भी डिप्लोमेसी की बात आती है, we talk about Kanik, we talk about Vidur, we talk about Bhishma and all these Shakuni, they take the center stage, and Yudhishthir is not talked about. But I think it was a very tactical choice also. Dushala being Duryodhan's sister was the key thing, because आपने essentially अपने brother-in-law को मार दिया. तो वो एक problematic situation थी. So yes, I think we should close this session now, and next session we will decide what we would do on. But the tomorrow's session is decided. We will talk about our game that we have recently announced called Ranbhoomi Kurukshetra. It's a board game that we have created which talks about the battle of Kurukshetra on a board, and you can basically experience it in some way by playing as a warrior in that battle, use your Divyastras and experience the events of the battle on the board. It's a very मतलब मेहनत करके बनाया है, बहुत सोच समझ के बनाया है, और इसको आप लोग खेलेंगे तो अच्छा लगेगा, और महाभारत के बारे में आपको कुछ नया सीखने को मिलेगा, ये मैं गारंटी देता हूँ कि there would be few things, there would be few elements that most of you would not have known. On the board, it doesn't talk about, it is not based on B.R. Chopra's Mahabharat, it is based on Vedavyasa's Mahabharat. So you will always find something great and new to learn also. Even adults would enjoy it. So tune in tomorrow, 7 p.m. To talk about Ranbhoomi Kurukshetra, the board game. And we should close this session now. Thank you for connecting with us. And thank you, Bharti. Thank you, Pranshu. And thank you, Deepak. Namaste.
Thank you, God.